Welcome back to the Human First podcast with me, Adrian Murphy. For those of you who don't know, I am the CEO of Murphy Wealth and also the host of the Human First podcast. I've got the pleasure of speaking to people and having great conversations with really interesting people every day, and that's kind of what we're trying to do here with the podcast, bring some of those conversations to you and talk about some of the things that we might talk about, you know, people's goals and aspirations and values and why they do what they do and where they're trying to go. So today's guest is probably a really good example of somebody following their dreams, I guess. I have Ewan Maclean with me today of the Maclean Brothers. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, I guess that's well, first of all, hello, and thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome.
But you know, so Maclean Brothers is what we're going with, definitely.
Yeah.
Previously, we did a row across the Atlantic and we were called Broer, which was a combination of brothers and ore, and we thought it was very clever. It was crap name. But of course, we had to then kind of explain that to everyone and then be like, which is the Maclean Brothers, and I'm Maclean, whatever. So it was just so convoluted. So yeah.
Once you have to start explaining it, they're thinking maybe this isn't working.
We've not got the messaging right here.
Right. So the Maclean Brothers. So it's thank you for coming to sit with me, because I know you're incredibly busy. I don't really know where to start with you because you've already done so much, which is absolutely fascinating, and you're about to do something even more incredible, and you're right in the middle. You're prepping for that. You've literally been up all night, getting ready. And I'm not going to spoil it just yet for those listening who don't know. So maybe I tell you what. Why don't we start with who's Ewan then?
Sure.
A wee bit of your background.
Sure. So, gosh, where to start? I mean, what would I describe myself as? Probably as an engineer. You know, I've been working as an engineer professionally for the last kind of 10 years or so, down south, working for Dyson. And one of three brothers. I've got two younger brothers, and I think we're quite an outward bounds, adventure-y type family. You know, not in a maybe more traditional sense. We spent a lot of time way up north, top Scotland. We hamlet called Ned in Assynt, and it's just, you know, there's not really much up there. It's kind of absolutely wild. So a lot of time kind of on wee boats and, I don't know, getting up to no good, to be honest. Kind of starting bonfires and getting lost in boats and causing lots of stress to mum and dad. That kind of thing.
Can imagine.
Me and my brothers had the kind of mad idea a couple of years ago of rowing across the Atlantic, which was it was a race that my youngest brother learned about and then kind of convinced the two of us to kind of take on. And I guess that was maybe 6 years ago. I think that kind of idea was pitched to me and the middle one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's something that we were quite taken with. You know, it was an amazing project, amazing challenge thing to kind of, I think, work together and, you know, try and figure out how on earth do you do this thing, you know, because it's not just, it's a physical challenge. Absolutely. That's you know, there's no question on that side. But I think what people don't realize actually is that the much bigger part of the challenge is getting to that start line. Yeah. And, you know, as you said, I was up all night last night, packing freeze-dried food, which we've shipped this morning, down to someone who's going to ship it out to another place for us. But it's one of these kind of weird things that you find yourself doing, you know, in preparation for taking on one of these big challenges. Yeah. And that's one of a very many kind of long list of different kind of weird and wonderful things you find yourself doing. Yeah. Which is, you know, it's raising a lot of money to do the challenge. It's raising money for a cause that you care about, which I think we'll get into in a bit. And then there's all the kind of boat prep and, you know, we've been very involved, which, I'll tell you a bit about our latest project in a wee bit and the technical side on that front. But yeah, so I guess we've, you know, kind of almost by accident, you know, I've gone from being an engineer on a kind of career path, much very traditional, in a lot of senses, to kind of getting swept up with kind of taking on a big kind of crazy thing with my two brothers, and then I guess discovering a lot of purpose along the way. I think that's really, I think yeah, I think that's kind of one of the main things that we got from taking on the Atlantic and rowing across the ocean. And yeah, I think that's led to us, three of us and our dad and a few others. We've set up a charity over the last kind of, well, that's been our main focus really over the last kind of 5 years. Again, for me, it's been kind of on the side of working, so it's been kind of volunteering a bit of extra time where I can, and then Lachlan, the youngest one's been kind of managing that. And then more recently, we've been taking on this next big project, and that has been all-consuming.
Yeah, I can imagine. We will get on to why that is in a moment. Maybe just then we can go into a bit more detail on the first challenge. But I just want to ask, you're an engineer at Dyson. We can say that, all right. And your youngest brother, what was the kind of, you were down south working away? How often did you see each other at that point? Speak?
Yeah, not that much. I think that was probably one of the things. I'd gone across to university. I'd finished at Glasgow. I was at Glasgow for 5 years. Finished around the kind of time that Lachlan was coming towards the end of school, so he was still at home. Jamie was also studying in Glasgow, so I was seeing him every now and again. And then moved down, started work. I think as a family we went through a bit of a tricky time. Mum and Dad separated, which was I think quite tough, but actually in a lot of ways brought the three of us together because we were looking out for each other. That was our priority. Mum and Dad had some stuff to figure out, and I think the three of us, we wanted to prioritise that. Each of us were okay, but I think particularly like Lachlan, where he was like 16, kind of coming out of school. Tough time
for him, yeah,
for sure. But then we got through that, and then I moved down, started work at Dyson. Again, it was kind of I'd finished an engineering degree. Kind of thought, might nice to go and do some traveling or something like that. I'd never done that before. Yeah. I'd gone straight from school straight into uni. Never really gone away during summers or whatever. And then I was like, I should probably, for Mum and Dad, I should probably apply for some jobs that appeal. I'll apply for like one or two, and then unfortunately in some ways, got the job, and then I ended up finishing on the Thursday, and then started work on the Monday.
You're kidding?
Yeah, literally. So finished uni on the Thursday, and then started.
Not even a weekend. Not even a week. Greece or something
exactly,
like that.
long weekend, and then I was down south. Working away for kind of 4 years, going through the kind of grad scheme and working my way up the kind of slippery pole in many ways, but getting a huge amount from it professionally.
Yeah.
But wasn't really seeing much of Jamie and Lachlan. No, I mean, I guess it's just part of life. If you're living, a couple hundred miles away, it's you see each other at Christmas or maybe like once or twice if you've got a family holiday, which was obviously it became a bit more. Separated. Mum was in Edinburgh, Dad was in Edinburgh as well, but we were doing kind of different holidays. So we try and do like a week with Mum, a week with Dad, and that's we continue to do that, and that's great. But that was really the only time that we saw each other for kind of 4 or 5 years, until Lachlan kind of discovered about this row across the Atlantic, and actually him and Jamie originally they because they were kind of close to proximity to it. They were both in Glasgow by this point, studying. They were talking about doing it, and then I came home. I think it was for Christmas actually. I came home and discovered about it, and was like, "There's no way you two are doing this." And I'm being like any family events forevermore will be just anyway.
And you get a bit of stick for being the smaller one, if you don't mind
me
saying.
No, absolutely. Small in stature for sure. No, and I think that that's, I guess, like, I mean, Lachlan especially, he's like 6'3", 6'4". He's quite a bit taller. And Jamie's always been very lean, very strong rugby player. And I've been very sporty, but I think in kind of less traditional, not less. I mean, like in other sports that I'd maybe excel a bit better at, skiing and stuff like that. Where it doesn't rely on being kind of a big rugby player or whatever. Which is weird for rowing, but it actually does. It is. I think it's there's a perception of what a rower should look like, and I think for for river rowing and for like, you know, if you're putting out huge amounts of power for a couple kilometers or whatever, absolutely, like that's what you need.
No, well, and actually, not to spoil it, but I remember it. So there is what I should say is a film. You've already made a film about the first challenge, which was Rowing Atlantic, which I think, am I right in saying you're world record holders?
Yeah,
officially, or is it, how did?
No, yeah, officially. So we, it was all kind of by accident, I guess, a wee bit. And, you know, we're obviously, you know, we're ambitious, I guess, and we wanted to do things as well as we possibly could. But it wasn't our, you know, we weren't setting out to break records. No. We weren't necessarily setting out to even kind of win, you know, our race class. The way that the races do it is you're kind of up against the other teams that have the same number of people, you know, in their team.
Yes.
So we were up against the trios, and I guess we're competitive and wanted to do as well as we could. But I think our much bigger priorities were enjoying it as much as we could, and coming out the other side, you know, having had an amazing experience, and, you know, being, you know, stronger together and closer as a result, not coming out the other side and, you know, never wanting to speak to each other again. Yeah. Which sadly it does, you know, it does happen.
Yeah,
you know,
teams
kind of have major fallings out, and you know, they can't you know, speak to each other ever again, which is really horrible. It's tough.
Yeah.
Because it is a very pressurized, difficult environment. But yeah, with the records, I guess we did enough things differently. I think, you know, we in some ways, I guess it would have been a risk in some ways, because, you know, the sea, you know, you can have any manner of different crossings. You could have loads of weather against you, and if that's the case, then being a team of 5 really, you know, strong 6 foot whatever it is guys, which is, you know, the majority of the teams, I guess, you know, it's usually kind of guys that have been doing lots of deadlifts and are very, very strong and can put out way more power, absolutely. But like the way the race works, for calculating how much food you have is very dependent on your weight.
Yeah, of course.
And the kind of slightly outdated philosophy, I guess, for preparing for one of these things physically is quite often to put on a lot of muscle mass and a lot of extra weight, fat, that you're going to kind of lose at sea, because you need the reserves. That's kind of the mentality, which I think it's a bit outdated, to be honest. I think your body's not in an efficient state if you're you know, in that state. I think you're much better being, and if you look at any other endurance sport, you know, that it's not the case. You know, people are very lean 100%. And actually, from an endurance perspective, I think being small has a lot of benefits. You know, I was taking a lot less food. You know, I was 68 kilos when I started the race, compared to some of the other guys with like 130 kilos. And that's, you know, that's a huge amount of force that you're potentially putting through joints, and a lot of extra food. You know, the food is calculated. It's, you know, a multiplication of the number of kilos of your body weight times the number of calories times the number of days they expect you to be. So that's dependent on the kind of the number of the team. But yeah, I guess we did that. We were quite different in terms of our physical preparation. Our diet was quite different. We had, you know, focused a lot more on being very healthy, carb. We weren't trying to bring loads of protein or anything like that, because I think you're not going to, well, our advice, which was given to us by Chloe Lanthea, was very much to, you know, not try and kind of focus on the idea of like repairing your body or muscle repair, that kind of thing. Much more to have available fats and available carbs that you can digest easily and access, and then turn into
because recovery's not.
Doesn't really happen in that environment. No. You're just non-stop, and you know, it's that is the kind of slightly unique thing I think about ocean rowing. I guess for sailing it's the same, but it is non-stop. When you're in, you can't just get off and go for a walk or whatever. You're in for until the end. That's it. Yeah. But yeah, and then I guess there was a couple other things we did differently. I think technical preparation, I was quite particular about certain things on the boats. Yeah. You know, it's more than any sport, it's a game of marginal gains. You know, because it's such a long time at sea, and if you can increase things or improve things by 1%, then it all stacks up.
Yeah, we should probably talk about it then.
Yeah,
we talked a wee bit
around about it.
Why were you packing rations all night to be shipped away? Then you might as well tell us.
Well, I guess after 35 days at sea on the Atlantic, when we got to the end, we had already decided that we wanted to do another big row for sure. We really enjoyed it. I think we got so much from it as a project, personally, and I think we knew we wanted to do something. I think there's a cost to these things, a huge cost, to be honest, in terms of not just all the things you have to give up in terms of social life and all that kind of thing, but there's a huge strain on family and the stress of loved ones going off to sea. It's perceived as being a very, very dangerous thing. There's a lot of things that we won't get bogged down in that, but there's a lot of things that are keeping you safe in that environment. But it is absolutely stressful for loved ones. And I think that's been a thing that slowed us to going on to the next thing, to make sure it was the right time for like mum and dad and for our partners. But we did know that we wanted to kind of get on to the next thing. We've been planning for the last 2 years. A row across the Pacific Ocean,
right?
Which why not?
Why not?
If you're going up to the next level,
Atlantic now,
What's the biggest ocean? We'll do the Pacific. So it's a 9,000 mile row.
Sorry, what's the Atlantic? Just to be clear, what the Atlantic one was?
It's just under 3,000. It's about 3,000 miles, 2,800 nautical miles, something like that.
And this one is
one's about 9,000 miles. Yeah, kind of 8,400 nautical miles, whatever. Okay. So it's about 3 times.
So you were 35 days.
35 days.
And this is, we don't know what it's going to be, but you're anticipating
about 120 days. Yeah. That'd be good. I mean, it could be faster.
Yeah.
It could be, a sub 100 would be amazing. But I think, the current record for fastest ever crossing of the Pacific is 161 days. So we're trying to shave off quite a bit off that already. So
wow.
If we get to 150, I think we'll feel like it's been slower than we'd planned.
Yeah.
You can only fit so much food on the boat.
Yeah. Well, hence the painstaking freeze drying and packing of food and rations.
Absolutely. It's a real challenge actually, because it's been done non-stop and unsupported. That's what we're trying to do. So from South America to Australia, without stopping at any islands or having a support boat or having someone give you a resupply or whatever.
Yep.
It's been done by solos because I think they can carry enough food for the amount of time they're at sea. But it's never been done by a team for that entire distance. Right.
Okay.
It's been done in either with support or getting a resupply or stopping at islands. Right. But yeah, I mean, I think I think we get kind of bogged down in the possible records and the things that we might kind of, I think that's part of it. That's part of us hope. We're trying to do it as well as we possibly can, and that's the same ethos from the Atlantic. To be honest, do it as well as we possibly can in every area, and that of course involves doing it as fast as we can as well. Mm-hmm. But I think those records they're more a mechanism for us to try and bang the drum, make a lot of noise, and ultimately try and drive donations to the charity. That's what we're trying to do. That's really the purpose for it.
Is it going into the first row, having never done it? You don't have any expectations, right?
Yeah.
You don't know what you're gonna, right? Is it? How do you prepare differently now mentally, I guess, because you kind of know, and yes, you've kind of get these, milestones and records and stuff in mind. You also know kind of what you're going to face and some of the challenges, and then there's going to be other stuff. How do you prepare differently for that?
Yeah, gosh, I guess there's different, and you're totally right. There's different areas that you need to prepare for. So there's like the physical side is different. You've got to prepare for that length of time at sea.
Yeah.
And the volume of training has been quite a lot more. It's been kind of a full year.
So we should just say you've quit your job now, haven't you?
Yes.
Should probably drop that in there.
So yeah, absolutely, yeah. So
It's a full-time endeavour now.
Absolutely full time. Yeah, I made that decision back in September.
Right.
You know,
Okay.
had a great career at Dyson. I did kind of got a lot from it, but it was too difficult to manage doing kind of sometimes 45-hour training weeks. You know, trying to raise all the money that you need to do the challenge, trying to do all the sponsorship side of things, trying to build up the social media and the PR side of things. Get the boat ready because we built the boat as well.
Yeah, so we should probably touch on that.
Yeah, that's another area. So how much time do we have?
Just that. We go into the full schematics of the boat, but that's very deliberate again because of the learnings you've got from the previous experience.
Yeah, and it comes back to just trying to do it as well as we possibly can. You know, we spent 35 days kind of looking at problems with the boat, partly because it's a really interesting space from an engineering perspective in that there's a lot of problems that haven't been solved because you know it's a relatively new sport. Not many people have done it. And you don't really discover the problems until you're halfway through an ocean crossing. So the number of people that have done it and are kind of I guess able to then design solutions and build things to kind of push the boat design side forward is quite small. There's obviously a few out there. We've been working with an amazing boat builder called Mark Slats,
right?
And he's a absolutely incredible guy. Rowed multiple oceans, and it's just like building the best boats. And we've been very fortunate to be working with him on building this boat. But again, we've come at it from the same side of there's various different issues that we wanted to solve and make our lives kind of safer, more comfortable, and ultimately kind of work on those marginal gains to try and get a faster crossing. So yeah, I mean the boats. Oh gosh, I could talk about that for days. But it's very top level. It's very light. It's built in the same way as kind of F1 cars and jet wings. It's basically very expensive manufacturing techniques, and you need big facilities. So we've worked with this guy Mark Slats out in the Netherlands, who he's got some ins with various companies that do mostly like sail racing kind of, and it's that's obviously it's amazing the technology in sailing these days, and I guess that's where he's kind of built up his contacts and built up those supplier networks. So that's been fascinating. That's been amazing. We've done all sorts of modifications to the boats. And it's comparing our last boat, which was about a ton. This boat is
was it as much as that?
Yeah, it's about a ton unladen.
Wow,
about a ton.
Unladen. Gee,
and then when you add in all the food, it kind of adds up. But this boat is like 280 kilos, so it's a lot lighter.
And
you can it makes a lot of difference actually for particularly rowing into weather if you've got stuff against you. It can be quite tough to kind of row against it, and sometimes you don't have a choice. Particularly, on this Pacific crossing, if we're getting blown into islands or something, you need to be able to row. For your safety, you need to be able to get away from that situation. But I mean, at the same time, though, although we've got much lighter boats, we're bringing like 4 times the amount of food. So you've got kind of a lot less space in a lot of ways because there's just piles and piles of food, and
so the boat's lighter, but you're not going to have much more space than because the design is reasonably similar. It looks like
quite
to
similar.
an untrained eye. It's quite similar to your previous boat.
Totally, and the main differences really are in the it's kind of boring almost, but it's the manufacturing technique. So it's instead of being the previous boat was a fiberglass layup, so they kind of paint on layers of resin and layers of the glass fiber and build up layers, and it's you get the strength of the boat, of the hull, just by having kind of lots of layers, and you're confident that it's going to be enough. With this boat, it's basically put into under vacuum pressure. You use a pre-impregnated carbon fiber fabric, which is that basically means that the resin's been very accurately dosed onto the fabric, so it's like the perfect amount of resin to fabric, and then that whole thing goes in an oven, a giant oven like the size of a room, or some parts of it go into a thing called an autoclave, which is basically a bomb. Like it's a very high pressure cylinder that they pump up to like 8 times atmosphere, so it is literally a bomb. If you punctured a hole in it, that would explode. But that basically forces the layers together under very high pressure,
Wow.
and that creates a very, very strong but very, very light.
Much
product.
thinner then, is it?
No, honestly, it looks
again,
very
it's the
similar, and
same.
that's why it's kind of almost boring to describe it, because it is literally the manufacturing techniques that makes it interesting. From my perspective, I'm a nerd on these things, but and there's obviously a lot of other the technologies come on in a lot of different areas. From a safety perspective, we carry these little things called PLBs, which are a safety beacon. If you go overboard, pull it, and you can get a signal goes to the Coast Guard. We can now actually track those from the boat. It's got AIS on them. It's called. It's a thing that allows you to see from the chart plotter, where that person is that's gone overboard. So stuff like that. Things have definitely come on in the last 5 years. And even within the sport of ocean rowing, there's been kind of marginal improvements, and then we've kind of come on. We've got a partner called Formlabs, who are a 3D printing company.
Yeah.
And I know about them through work, through having worked at Dyson for many years. But they've come on board and given us kind of state of the art 3D printer that we've been kind of custom building a whole load of different parts for the boat as well. So it'll be quite cool. Some of it will work, and some of it totally won't work, and it'll be we'll be stuck with it.
You're the technical guy on board. So if something goes wrong electronically or whatever, it's going to be on you. So I take it then you've had a lot of input into that to make sure, like, some of the stuff that happened in the previous crossing doesn't now. Something else might, of course.
Oh, totally.
But at least you know where everything is and kind of how to repair it. I guess would be part of it.
Jamie and Maclean, they're pretty on it as well. They're both very practical and would be able to sort out kind of a fair amount of the issues. I think from an electrical side, probably it'd be more my side. I get my kind of background. I've worked obviously within engineering at Dyson, but specifically, I guess, find myself kind of gravitating more towards the early product side, and very much from starting from a sheet of paper to kind of a working prototype and a rig, and then and kind of so on into the development cycle. And I guess I've always had a fascination with trying to understand what the problem is and then create a solution for it. And I guess my role has very much been starting with a blank sheet of paper, working on your own pretty much, to building up the idea, the design, but then also building up the team to kind of, these projects, if they're, depending on how far they go through the development cycle, are like £100 million projects. They're quite big, big projects they can be, and very complex, I'd say. But you still have to go through that early stage where you're understanding what the problems are, you're understanding the user, you're designing solutions with meaningful technologies that actually solve that problem. And I think, bringing that into this new challenge, which I've no longer have a team of 45. I've got Ewan Brothers trying to figure it out. Well, that's not true. We've got an amazing team around us that are, people supporting, people that we've hired to help with the project. Businesses that are helping us to kind of do what we're doing, partners that are helping us fund it, but then also, weighing in. So actually, the team is. It's probably bigger than my team that I had at Dyson in a funny way.
Yeah. Beyond what you've already experienced, what do you foresee being the biggest challenge with this next challenge? Yeah,
and I think it goes back to expectation and we've gone out and said publicly we're going to row across the ocean and we're going to raise £1 million for clean water projects.
Yeah,
we don't have first of all, like, no one's rowed across the entire Pacific non-stop non-sport as a team. People have done it solos, so that's kind of makes that slightly less impressive. But it's a thing that very few people have done, and like raising £1 million, we don't have a clue really what we're doing. We're just trying to figure it out.
Yeah,
and I think we do have expectations, I guess, from that we've built up through how we did it with the Atlantic, and but it's a different ball game entirely. The getting to that kind of trying to raise £1 million. You can't just have a few dinners and hope that it kind of translates. It's a much broader strategy that goes from kind of working with kind of corporates and getting kind of financing through that, through events, through kind of large expansion on the social media side of things, and donations. I guess it comes from many different angles, but I think we're trying our best to map out that strategy. But ultimately, and put the team in place, and that goes from the kind of campaign manager through to PR, social, the media guys that are kind of putting together videos and stuff like that. The charity side, obviously, we've got the trustees, and they're supporting on that front. And then there's lots of other people that are involved in the team, less on the charity fundraising side, but there's a whole list of folk there. But ultimately, when we get to the start, we can set as much of the strategy as we can, but we're going to have to hand it over and just be like, right,
that's right. Yeah.
Hopefully this goes well.
See you in 100 and something days.
And I think it's hard to not have things like the arrival moment. We had no preperceptions of what that was going to be for the Atlantic. We weren't expecting anything. We actually, because we'd got across faster than we'd expected to be, none of our friends and family had actually made it there on time. So we thought there was going to be no one there.
A couple of circles.
Yeah, we stalled a bit. We did. We actually stalled for a few hours just so our mum could make it, because we knew that she was on the flight.
I remember seeing that in the thing, in the film.
But for this one, I think it's hard not to have those kind of the ambition for the fundraising target, and the ways that that's going to hopefully work with social media working really well and getting lots of following, and then hopefully people kind of, I guess, believing in what we're doing and supporting it. But it might not take off, and that's that's the risk you're taking, I guess.
I guess on that, I don't think there's any doubt. It captures the imagination. The fact you've done it and you've got the film and you can kind of show a bit of what's involved, I think gives people that behind the scenes look at it and how challenging it is. So you've got this far and you've done incredibly well just to do that. It's May you leave, is that right?
April.
Actually.
Yeah,
right.
We brought it forward. It was originally going to be May, but we're looking at April. Right.
So what has to, maybe a couple of things then, what has to happen, what's going to happen between now and then? I mean, you're right into the final. Yeah.
Well, so on the training side, we're starting to build in sleep deprivation training, which is, it's just more about being comfortable operating when you're sleep deprived. And just getting up at 2 a.m, doing a 2-hour row, and then going back to bed and getting up at normal time and doing your normal day, and just kind of getting used to that. Yeah. I think that's you can't bank sleep. You can't prepare in that way, but you can get more comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think that's just through exposure therapy almost. You're just doing it enough that you can you can still function. So that's on the training side. There's probably the boat's obviously shipped, so that's in a container ship at the moment on the way to Peru. Hopefully it'll make it.
It's a long swim otherwise.
Yeah, I know. But there's a lot of gym work, so it'll be kind of time on the erg and a lot of kind of mobility and strength work, which is probably 4 hours a day, something like that. So that'll be ongoing up until we leave. We've got the last bits of kind of sponsorship. So I guess we've taken it because it's a bigger challenge, because we've built the boat, because we're trying to have budget for social media and for a team on that side. The whole challenge is really expensive. I mean, so eye-watering amount. It's like £340,000 just to do it. Yeah. And that's a really, that's why I think we're so invested in, because if that doesn't translate to then, helping us raise $1 million, then I don't know. I guess you can't necessarily say, well, we should have just spent the time raising that money and giving it to charity, because you wouldn't raise it. You wouldn't raise it. So it doesn't really work like that.
Absolutely.
But it's been an amazing learning experience. I've spent quite a few years laterally at Dyson, particularly, I'm kind of working with a broader team, but very much being the spokesperson for the project, being the head of the project, where you are just dealing with James Dyson. It's just he sees you as the project. So that's kind of the role of the design manager. They don't see the rest of the team behind that person, or James doesn't see the rest of the team as much, because he can't have that many people in his head.
Of course not.
And I guess those skills have been quite useful in that I've been able to take that to then conversations where we're kind of, you're talking big sums of money with companies that, you need to be able to return that value back in terms of, exposure. And there's a very real value, but it's still a lot of money that you need to kind of communicate that, and you've got to build that relationship and make sure that there is a mutual value that's worthwhile for both sides. Because if it doesn't make sense, then you don't want to push it. But it's your pool of available people that can support you becomes smaller, I guess, because it's you're talking like $100,000 or so for the top level sponsors, which is, geez, it's
quite a small pool.
Yeah, it's quite a small pool for sure. Yeah, and it's it's been a great learning curve, and we've got some fantastic partners that have come on and helped us.
Well, if anyone listening and watching wants to support, or we'll get all the details at the end from you. Where can people find stuff? We'll come on to that actually, because I think there'll be plenty of people really interested in the project.
Well, I think then I guess where we're really turning to now, and we're trying to flesh it out. I kind of spoke about it a little bit, but it's figuring out the strategy for the fundraising side, and trying to just rally as much support as we possibly can. And that goes from kind of really small donations, kind of a couple quid or whatever, up to kind of working with corporates again on trying to engage, support, and drive back value in one way or another. Ultimately, to try and raise £1 million for clean water, which would be it'd be around 30,000 people with clean water for life, which is would be massive, be a huge. It's
amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, that you need, I know from experience, you can't rely on small donations to get to £1 million. Unfortunately, you're going to need some fairly big help along the way to that. But it's an incredible thing you're doing. It really is. I love it. It's really inspirational. So I'm a big fan, and I'm almost loath to ask. I'm looking at my card, thinking, do I really want to ask that question? What's next?
What's after?
Just after you've rowed the Pacific.
Yeah. No, it's a good question, because I guess we've taken quite a big. First of all, I've quit a 10-year career.
Yeah.
That was quite a big step. So I definitely need to figure out that I need to make a living one way or another.
When you're not on the boat.
Talk about to do the row. I'd kind of, over a couple of years, I'd done up a house with a pal and sold that. And the day I handed over the keys, I also quit my job. And then the day after that, I moved to Edinburgh. So it was quite a big life move. And that, all the money that I've got from the house at the moment is basically just funding the road.
Enough, yeah.
I'm living with Dad, so it's right, I've literally everything is invested in making this road happen. So hopefully we'll get the sponsorship across the line, and then I'll not have to have all the money that I've managed to personally.
I think it would be remiss of me in my role as financial planner here not to express some concern about your future. No, but what it is, we do think about this is like an incredible thing you're doing, and you don't want to distract from that. But I guess your mind does drift to as much what's next, but what am I doing? Because you've got a whole new set of skills and experience and contacts and all these things you've done, and I don't know, do you want to go into boat design instead, something like that?
No, well, I think it could be, I think it will be trying to do something myself. I'm not sure, or possibly it might be with Ewan Maclean. It could be with pals from Dyson or elsewhere. But I think probably I really enjoy, and I have really enjoyed with both the Atlantic and then taking all the learnings from that and then putting it into the Pacific project, which is very much like starting a business, because you have to create a brand effectively. You have to pitch to a lot of people. You have to raise the finance, and then you need to there's a lot of interesting bits of the project which we've talked about, but I really enjoy that, and I think that's why I gravitated at Dyson towards working in kind of early product and kind of building projects up and presenting them to Dyson, getting them through to whatever stage, and then handing them on. I do really enjoy that kind of that early innovation side, and I think building something.
Yeah.
I get a lot of drive from that, and I think having something that also has like a positive impact, I think that's I know motivates me on a day-to-day basis. It might be that it's just more of my time I can spend working on the charity and doing charity initiatives on that side, which I think is the most likely situation, that I'll be kind of a couple of days a week on that, and then a couple of days, I think, try my own foray into something or other, probably product related. That's where my experiences are. And there's a lot of contacts that we've built up through partners through the row, or I think people that kind of have believed in us for one reason or another.
I think I would hope that by the end of this, a lot more people are going to know about you as well by the time you do this challenge. So just as we begin to wrap up, and thank you. We could spend a lot more time, I think, talking. I feel like we've only just skimmed the surface, excuse the pun.
All of my answers have been really long, kind of weaving around. Hopefully I've mostly kind of covered.
It's fascinating. So maybe just give us what's some of the key dates and milestones that people should look out for over the next few months.
So we'll set off very beginning of April.
Beginning of April, right?
Yeah,
okay,
beginning of April. Really is. So we've got a countdown kind of towards that on the social media. But we should be putting out quite a lot of stuff. In terms of, the plan is to be live streaming for quite a lot of it. We'll see how much we actually manage to do. It's when you get out to sea, we'll see if the systems work.
But you don't know until you're out there.
You don't. Yeah, with the best will in the world, you can't really test it.
No.
So we should be. We'll be at least telling the story as effectively as we possibly can with the tools that we've got, and we're set up to be doing everything from like live streaming through to, it might just be kind of audio updates or photos or whatever, blog posts. But we'll be sharing the story as much as we can, because again, the focus on this one is not about doing it as fast as we can and winning breaking a record or whatever. It's very much about being as effective as we can at telling the story and bringing sharing what it's like to be rowing across an ocean, because I don't think that's really been shared that well. I don't think there's been a good example of an ocean row where it's really, it's captivated an audience and they've been able to actually express what it's like to be, kind of 50 days at sea. And that's our goal. We're going to do that as well as we possibly can. There'll be a lot of means that people can follow us, and then we'll arrive hopefully just before the Lions tour in Sydney.
I'm sensing an ulterior motive.
No, that's kind of a happy coincidence, but we'll stick around. We've got family out in in Australia as well, so we'll probably do a bit of that.
Where in Australia do you arrive? Perth?
Sydney. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So the plan is we're just trying to
into Sydney Harbour.
Below the bridge with the Opera House is the plan. So so if we get that media moment, we'll be pretty happy, because it'll be quite a cool.
Maybe
they'll
set up the fireworks like they do at New Year on the bridge for you. That would just be.
See, hopefully it's not New Year, literally.
Yes, well, that'd be an awfully long roll. So we always like to get our guests to leave a wee question for the next guest, and it was Jazz Singh from the Wee Curry House that left the question for you, which is, who has had the biggest influence on you?
Gosh. Yeah, I mean, I guess beyond, parents or kind of direct family, I think there's a few people, definitely. I think one of the probably most formative was probably a teacher that I had during, it was kind of primary school through to, I was at a Steiner school, so they do kind of their yearings quite different.
Right, okay.
They kind of, but from the ages of like probably about I'd say probably about 8 until about 15, no, 14, something like that. I had this teacher, a guy called Nick Brett, who was, he was just, I mean, I don't know, he was a very, very supportive teacher, and it's difficult to kind of really put a finger on exactly kind of why he was so formative, but I think his kind of outlook on life, and I think the way that he signer education is a really interesting one, which I could talk about for ages as well. But it's quite kind of holistic. It's a lot more focused on arts and drama and kids expressing themselves, and not exams, and not that side of things. But I think Nick was a huge influence for me.
Very good. That's quite an early influence as well.
Well, I think just because I think I think during your younger years, I think you're more likely to have kind of, I don't know. I guess that
probably makes a bigger
more
impression.
Pliable,
Exactly.
And I think we all had really good teachers. With Nick was my class teacher. In Steiner's, a class teacher basically takes the entire class for the first 2 hours of the day, doing different subjects. So they do like 6-week blocks of like farming, and then maths, and then they'll do like building, and then they'll do fishing, and then they do a whole range of different, really interesting subjects, which is quite unique, and it's one of the most amazing things about the education. But it's taught by the class teacher, and they have to like learn about that specific subject. They've got kind of materials and stuff that they've got to support that, but they have to learn it, and then they lead the class and teach the kind of kids at a relatively young age. So it's just kind of an introduction to those areas, like Greek mythology or whatever, for 6 weeks.
Wish I'd gone to that.
No, it was really cool. It was really good. And so he was kind of like a parental figure almost.
Fantastic. And what would you like to leave behind for the next guest? What would be your question to pose?
I think, I guess we talked about it a bit during the podcast. I think looking for positivity is such an important thing to outlook, and it's a thing that you have to consciously do. So I think asking, what are the things that you're going to do to have a positive outlook, and I think it's just being conscious of that. So I guess Well,
listen, thank you so much for that. What are the kind of key media channels? So
you can follow us at the Maclean Brothers. I think that's for everything: LinkedIn, Instagram, all of them. TikTok. You can find us online at www.themacleanbrothers.com. And if you want to check out the charity and everything on that side, because I feel like we've barely skimmed that. I know. That's themacleanfoundation.org, and also the Maclean Foundation on social media. So they're probably the best places to find us.
If anyone wants to get involved or support you, then that's the way to do it.
Yeah. Any advice? We're doing as best we can. I think we've got a lot of things that we're quite happy with where we're at, but I think there's a lot of things that we'd welcome any support.
Absolutely.
So really appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me.
No,
really
thank you. Thank you for taking the time out, because I know how busy you are and how tired you must be. I can't even imagine. So thank you. That's been brilliant. Cheers.
Brilliant. Thanks.